The flashlight catches nothing but dust. Thick, slow clouds drift through the beam like the building is breathing. Every step sends more dust rising off the floor and furniture. My boots hit something hollow under the concrete. I stop. I listen. Nothing. And that's the problem. A building this size should not be this quiet. There should be pigeons, wind through broken glass, water dripping somewhere. That's what abandoned places sound like. This place doesn't sound like that. I sweep the flashlight left. A long corridor, doors on both sides, mostly closed. The paint has peeled back in long strips, and under it the plaster is the color of old bone. There's a smell I've been trying to ignore since I walked in. Not rot exactly. Something older. Something sealed. I've been doing this for 6 years. I've walked through steel mills with ash still in the furnaces. I've stood in collapsed hotel ballrooms at 2 a.m. with just a headlamp. I've been in places where the floor gave way mid-step, where I had to climb out through a window in the dark. I've never wanted to leave a place this badly, and I'd only been inside for 4 minutes. I almost didn't come here at all. The location came through a tip, just rough coordinates, 2 photographs, and 1 sentence. You should see what they left behind. No name. The account was deleted before I could reply. I pulled records, cross-referenced old maps, found one newspaper clipping from 1981 that mentioned the address once and never again. The article just stopped. That should have told me something. I take another step. The dust settles. The silence holds. At the far end of the corridor, just at the edge of my flashlight, there's a door that's different from the others. It's the only one locked from the outside. I stand there, looking at it. Not moving yet, just looking. Because in 6 years of doing this, I've learned one thing above everything else. The rooms someone tried hardest to seal off are always the ones that answer the most questions. And I'm not sure I'm ready for the answers yet. Before we get into this, I want to talk to you for a second. I mean that genuinely. Not as a hook, not as a trick to keep you watching. This one deserves a moment of honesty. My name doesn't matter as much as what I do. I walk into places the world has decided to stop thinking about. Factories that employed thousands of people and then one morning simply didn't anymore. Psychiatric institutions quietly shut down when the funding ran out. Old estate homes still full of furniture, still full of someone's life, with no one left to claim any of it. Tunnels that go places city records say they don't go. I've been doing this for 6 years professionally, longer than that out of pure obsession. I've documented over 200 locations across multiple countries. People come for the atmosphere, the history, the strange beauty that exists in things the world has abandoned. I understand why they come. I feel it too. None of that prepared me for this one. Here's what I need to say clearly. The reason this place affected me the way it did was not because of what I found inside. It was not a dramatic discovery. There was no single cinematic moment. It was the feeling of the place, what it seemed to still be holding on to decades after the last person walked out. Some buildings feel empty when you enter them. This one felt like it had been waiting. I spent 3 weeks after filming this deciding whether to post it at all. I'm still not entirely sure I made the right call. I went back and checked the footage 4 separate times, thinking the camera would make it feel flat, like just another location, it didn't. So, here is what happened. I'm not going to tell you where this place is. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What I will tell you is that it sits at the end of a road that isn't really a road anymore. More of a suggestion of one. A faint scar through overgrown grass and broken asphalt. The trees on either side have grown inward, their branches reaching toward each other overhead like they're slowly closing a door. By the time I could see the building, the track behind me had already disappeared into the green. It's in a rural area, the kind of place where you can drive 20 minutes without passing another car. People have been driving past this location for decades. I traced the surrounding roads on old maps, counted the farms within a 2-mile radius, looked at how many people would have passed within visible distance of this facility every day for years. None of them, as far as I can find, ever publicly asked what it was. I found out about it through an online community where people share coordinates and half-remembered local legends at 2 in the morning. Someone posted 3 images, no caption, no explanation. I almost scrolled past them. The photographs were old, clearly scanned from physical prints. They showed a building, long, low, institutional. The kind of architecture never designed to be beautiful, only functional, only containing. In the background of one image, barely visible, was a water tower with lettering faded to almost nothing. I spent an evening with image editing software trying to read it. The letters I recovered gave me enough to find a newspaper clipping from 1982. One article, small, buried on page 11 of a regional paper, announcing the facility had ceased operations. No reason given, no follow-up. Just a 3-paragraph notice that something had stopped, clean and administrative, and empty of the story underneath it. I drove out on a Tuesday morning, early, while the light was still gray. I parked a quarter-mile back and walked in. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not the comfortable silence of open countryside. This was a silence with texture, dense, close, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own footsteps, the sound your jacket makes when your arms move. Most abandoned places feel empty when you approach them. This place didn't feel empty. It felt like something inside had heard me coming and was completely still, waiting to see what I would do next. The door was unlocked. That was the first thing that struck me as wrong. Not dramatically wrong, but wrong in a quiet, procedural way. Every abandoned facility I've ever entered has required some effort to get into. There's always something to negotiate, some physical reminder that the building has been closed. This door swung open when I pushed it, smoothly, without resistance, like it had been opened recently enough that the hinges hadn't had time to stiffen. The entrance hall was wide and low-ceilinged, designed to move people through efficiently rather than welcome them. The floor was linoleum, once pale green, now darkened and lifting at the seams. My flashlight swept left and right and caught the first detail that stopped me cold. The chairs, 8 of them, arranged in 2 rows of 4 along the left wall, facing inward like a waiting room. Not knocked over, not scattered, arranged deliberately, as though someone had set them out that morning for people who were expected and simply never arrived. I moved further in. The corridor stretched ahead, doors branching off on either side. Abandoned industrial spaces have a particular visual language, machinery, signage, safety notices. This was not that. This was domestic, or close enough to domestic that the difference felt deliberate and uncomfortable. rooms with beds, not skeletal frames stripped down to rust and springs, but actual beds, some still made up with gray wool blankets tucked in with institutional tightness. A common room with a television, its screen caved inward, surrounded by low chairs facing it. A narrow dining room with long tables, still showing the ghost shapes of routine. The slight discoloration of the linoleum, where chairs had been pulled in and out thousands of times. The grease marks on the wall at exactly the height a person's shoulder would brush if they walked the same path every day for years. And then, the calendar. It was pinned to the wall near what I think was an administrative office, a small windowed room that looked out onto the main corridor. The kind of room designed so whoever sat inside could see everyone moving through the building without being easily seen themselves. The calendar was from 1983, October. Someone had crossed off the days one by one in pen, with the particular consistency of a person marking time rather than tracking appointments. The last crossed day was the 14th. After that, nothing. Just empty boxes, each one a day that was expected and never came. I stood there longer than I should have. Someone had stood in this exact spot every morning and crossed off the previous day. Someone had a routine here, a life structured around this building, these walls. And then, on the 15th of October, 1983, that stopped. I turned away from the calendar and looked back down the corridor. This was not a factory, not a warehouse, not a derelict hotel or an abandoned school. This was a place where people had lived, where they had been kept. And the difference between those two things, living somewhere and being kept somewhere, was something I was only just beginning to understand as I moved deeper inside. The further I went in, the less the building made sense. I mean that literally, architecturally. The front sections had a coherence to them, a flow, entrance, administration, common areas, residential wings. Institutional, yes, bleak, certainly, but organized around a legible idea of how people would move through the space. Then, somewhere around the third corridor junction, that changed. The first thing I noticed was a hallway that ended in a wall. Not a wall that had always been there. I could see the difference in the plasterwork, the way newer materials sat against older like a seam, slightly raised, slightly wrong in color, even under decades of the same gray dust. Someone had built that wall after the fact. Someone had decided this corridor should stop existing. I put my hand against it. The plaster was solid and thick. I knocked once, quietly, more out of instinct than expectation. The sound that came back was not quite hollow and not quite solid, something in between. I kept moving. The rooms in this section were different, because here, and this is the detail that has stayed with me more than almost anything else, the doors that were closed were locked from the outside, not from the inside, from the outside. When you lock a door from the outside, you are not keeping something out. You are keeping something in. When a building full of rooms is designed so that the locks face outward, toward the corridor, toward the people with authority and keys, that tells you something about the relationship between the people who ran this place and the people who lived inside it. I documented as many of those doors as I could, filmed them slowly, made sure the camera caught the latch mechanisms clearly. I wanted it on record. And then I found the sealed section. It was set back from the main corridor, behind a door that had been reinforced, not with the original hardware, but with additional brackets and a bar mount. the bar itself long gone, but the shadow of its position still worn into the metal. Around the doorframe, filling the gaps, was a material that had been applied quickly and without care for appearance. The goal was not neatness, the goal was permanence. Whatever was back there, someone had wanted it to stay back there. I stood in front of that door for a long time, and this is the part I have to try to explain, because footage cannot carry it no matter how good your camera is. The silence changed. It's not that a sound started or stopped, it's that the quality of the quiet shifted in a way that moved through me before I consciously registered it, the way you sometimes wake up at night, not because of a noise, but because of the absence of one that should have been there. My body understood it before my brain did. I stopped walking. I stood completely still, and I checked over my shoulder twice. The corridor behind me was empty. Of course it was empty. I had walked that corridor myself 30 seconds earlier. I turned back to face the sealed door. Whatever I had felt was coming from in front of me, from behind that reinforced frame, behind whatever decision had been made that this particular space needed to be separated from everything else. I reached out and touched the door once. Then I took a step back, not because I had decided not to go in, but because I needed another minute before I did. I want to be careful here. The easiest version of this story is also the most dishonest one. The easiest version turns what I found in those files into atmosphere, into dark detail that makes a video feel weightier without actually asking anything of the person watching. I've seen that done. I've probably done it myself in earlier years when I was less careful about the difference between documenting something and consuming it. I'm going to try not to do that here. The administrative office, the windowed room overlooking the main corridor, was where most of the remaining paperwork was concentrated, not because whoever left this place organized it that way, but because the metal filing cabinets held up better than paper folders in 40 years of damp and temperature fluctuation. The cabinets were still standing, most of the drawers still opened. What was inside was partial, damaged, and in some cases, clearly and deliberately incomplete. There is a difference between files that decay and files that have been gone through. Decay is random. It takes the edges first, works without preference or intention. What I found in several of those drawers had been sorted through by human hands. Sections removed, folders emptied and left in place like husks, the kind of gaps that don't happen by accident. But not everything was taken. What remained was enough. I'm not going to read names on camera. The people whose names were in those files did not consent to being here, did not consent to whatever was done to them inside this building, and they certainly did not consent to having their names spoken into a YouTube video decades later. What I will tell you is what the documents described in general terms, and I'll say it plainly. This facility housed people who had been committed, some by family members, some through legal processes, some through channels the records described in language so vague it functioned as concealment. The admissions paperwork used phrases that were clinical in presentation, but revealed, when read carefully, an enormous amount of discretion concentrated in very few hands. One signature in the right place and a person's life could be redirected here, to these corridors, to these rooms with the outward-facing locks. The stated reasons for admission covered a range that would not meet any modern clinical threshold. I'll leave it at that. The treatment records were harder to read than the admissions paperwork. Not because they were graphic. They were written in the same flat administrative language as everything else, but because flat language describing harmful things does not soften those things. It just makes them feel more deliberate, more chosen.
I sat on the floor of that office for a while, with the files in my lap. And I want to say something, I mean, without any performance behind it. There is a version of what I do that treats places like this as content, as backdrop, as aesthetic. I have thought about that version a lot over the years. I do not think I've always been on the right side of that line. But I know this: the people described in those files were real.
They had names I won't say, histories I only glimpsed the edges of, and they moved through these exact corridors, ate in that dining room, looked out of windows I was now looking out of with a camera and a choice about whether to be here. They did not have that choice. That asymmetry sat with me in that room and has not fully left me since. This stopped being an exploration somewhere in that office. I'm not sure exactly what it became instead. Something closer to a reckoning with the place, with what happened here, and honestly with myself, and why I do this, and what I owe to the history I walk through for a living. I put the files back where I found them. Then I stood up, picked up my camera, and went to find the sealed section.
The sealed door opened. Not easily. The reinforcement had done its job well enough that I had to work at it, find the point where age had created just enough give to allow movement. It took several minutes. My hands were dusty, and my breathing was audible on the recording by the time the door finally shifted inward. There was no dramatic crack, no sudden opening, just a slow, reluctant give, like the building had been holding its breath for 40 years and was only now, unhappily, releasing it. The air that came through was different, stale in a way the rest of the building was not, a deeper staleness, the kind that accumulates in a space that has been truly closed rather than merely abandoned. The flashlight beam landed on a corridor narrower than anything else in the building. Low ceiling, no windows, the walls closer together than felt necessary, than felt designed for comfort or efficiency.
They felt designed for control. I moved through it slowly. There were 3 doors on the left side. 2 were open, and the rooms beyond were small and bare, containment clearly. But the 3rd door was closed, and when I pushed it open and stepped inside, I stopped. I stood very still for a long time. The room was smaller than the others, not dramatically smaller, a few feet in each direction, but enough that you felt it immediately, felt the walls as a presence rather than a boundary. The ceiling was lower too, because there was a secondary panel installed below the original ceiling, close enough to a person's head that height would be a constant, daily awareness. There was a chair in the center of the room, a single chair bolted to the floor. And on the walls, at roughly seated head height, there were marks, not graffiti, not decoration, the kind of marks that accumulate slowly, made by someone with very little to work with over a very long period of time. Scratch marks mostly, and in one section near the corner, worn into the paint with what must have been a fingernail or the edge of something small and hard, a series of vertical lines in groups of 5. Someone had been counting days in this room. I did not count how many groups there were. I could not make myself do it. I said earlier I would try not to use this place as atmosphere, so I'm going to describe what this room was in plain language, because the plain language is already enough. This room was used for isolated confinement, for individuals who, according to whatever internal logic governed this facility, required separation from the already isolated population of the main building. It was not a medical space.
It was not a therapeutic space in any meaningful sense. It was a space where a person could be placed and left, and where the primary design consideration was that they could not leave until someone outside decided they could. That is what the bolted chair was for. That is what the lowered ceiling was for. That is what the marks on the wall were for, in the sense that they were for nothing. They were simply what happens when a person is left alone in a small room with no way to measure time except by making marks on a wall. I sat down on the floor of that room, not in the chair. I sat against the wall opposite it and looked at it in the beam of my flashlight and tried to hold the full weight of what I was looking at without moving away from it. This was the first time a building made me feel grief, not fear, not the productive unease that drives good exploration footage. Grief. The specific, heavy, irreversible grief of understanding something that cannot be understood and then set aside. Of knowing that a person sat in this room, in this chair, making those marks, and that their experience of this space was so far from mine, a visitor with a camera and a choice, that the distance between us felt almost physical. I stayed in that room for 20 minutes. Then I picked up my camera, stood up, and walked back toward the light. But I want to be honest with you. I did not feel like the same person who had walked in. I spent 3 weeks after leaving this building trying to find the full story. Not because I needed more material. I did it because I felt I owed it to the people this place had held. To understand as completely as I could what had actually happened here before I said anything publicly. What I found was not difficult to piece together once I knew where to look. And that is perhaps the most quietly devastating thing about all of it. This was not a hidden history. It was not suppressed or classified. It was simply never elevated, never followed up on, left in the obscurity that comes not from active concealment, but from collective disinterest, the kind of forgetting that happens when the people most affected have no platform from which to insist on being remembered. The facility opened in the late 1950s, established to house individuals described as unable to function independently in the community. That phrase covered, in practice, an enormous and troubling range of human circumstances. Mental illness, yes, but also intellectual disability, epilepsy, social nonconformity, poverty complicated by behavioral factors, and in several documented cases, simply the absence of a family willing to provide care and the presence of an authority figure willing to sign a form. It operated for roughly 25 years. During that time, it received periodic inspections, all of which returned broadly satisfactory assessments, despite, and I want to be precise here, despite conditions documented in the inspector's own notes as substandard, overcrowded, and in isolated cases, harmful. The gap between those notes and the final assessments is not an anomaly. It is a pattern. I found parallel documentation from at least 6 similar institutions operating in the same era under the same administrative framework, all showing the same structure. Concerns raised internally, conclusions softened externally, and a final record that allowed continued operation. This was not one bad facility. This was a system. It closed in 1983, October, which aligns with the calendar I found, with the crossed-off days ending on the 14th, following a review triggered not by an inspection or a complaint, but by a funding restructure. The people housed here were transferred to other facilities or discharged. The building was locked and left. No public statement was issued. No inquiry was opened. It was simply over, and the quiet that followed was apparently understood by everyone involved as the appropriate response. What happened here was not unique. The latter half of the 20th century is full of institutions like this one, places that operated in the space between public knowledge and public accountability, that housed vulnerable people under the justification of care while providing something that fell significantly short of it. Journalists and historians have documented this pattern extensively. There are archives, testimonies, people still living who passed through places like this and carry that experience every day.
The history exists. It is not secret. It is just not loud enough yet. I found the object near the end of my time in the building, in a small storage room off the main residential corridor. Most of what was in it was institutional: blankets, utensils, a broken clock, and on a shelf near the back, half hidden behind a collapsed cardboard box, a small tin, the kind that might once have held sweets or tobacco, with a floral pattern on the lid faded to almost nothing. I picked it up carefully. It had weight to it. Inside was a collection of objects so small and so specific that I had to stand very still after opening it. A button, a folded piece of paper with a name written in careful handwriting that I will not read aloud. 2 dried flowers, pressed flat and brittle. The color entirely gone, but the shape still perfectly preserved. A small length of ribbon, pale blue, tied in a bow that had held its form for 40 years. Someone had kept these things, had gathered them deliberately, protected them, hidden them in a tin on a shelf in a building they could not freely leave. These were the things that mattered enough to keep, the things that connected them to a life outside these walls, or to beauty, or to someone else, or simply to the idea that they were a person with a history and things worth preserving. I closed the tin carefully and put it back exactly where I had found it. I did not film its contents. Some things are not content. I drove home in silence. Not deliberately, I just forgot to turn the radio on. I drove for 2 hours through countryside that gradually became suburbs, that gradually became the city I live in, and at no point did I reach for the dial. I was still somewhere else the entire time, still in that corridor, still in that room with the bolted chair, still holding a small tin with a blue ribbon tied in a bow by hands I would never know. I've been doing this long enough to have developed a kind of professional processing for difficult locations. You download the footage, make notes while the details are fresh, eat something, sleep, return to it in the morning with enough distance to begin shaping it into something communicable. It's not callousness, it's just the practical machinery of turning experience into work. It did not work this time. I want to say something honest about what this video is and what it costs, and I want to say it without the kind of performed self-reflection audiences can reasonably find irritating. So I'll say it plainly and let it be imperfect. There is a difference between exploring a place and bearing witness to it. I've done both, often in the same building, sometimes in the same hour. Exploring is about the location, its history, its atmosphere, its architecture. Bearing witness is about the people. It requires refusing to let the building be more present than the human experience it contained. It requires a slower pace, a willingness to sit in discomfort without immediately converting it into narrative.
This location demanded witness. From the moment I walked in, it was asking something of me that pure exploration could not answer. And here is where I have to be honest about the part I find genuinely unresolved. I made a video about it. You are watching that video. It exists on a platform that generates revenue based on engagement, and I am a person whose livelihood depends, at least in part, on that engagement. Somewhere in the chain between that tin on that shelf and the screen you're watching this on, something happened that I'm not entirely comfortable with, even as I believe that visibility serves some purpose. That documenting a place like this is better than leaving it to continue its long, quiet disappearance. That the alternative to this video is not dignity for the people who were here, but simply continued anonymity, continued erasure. I believe that. Most days I believe it fully. But I also sat on the floor of a room where someone counted days on a wall and then came home and opened editing software.
Those two things exist in the same life, my life, and I don't think the discomfort of that should be smoothed over or resolved too quickly into a clean ethical position. Some locations are just empty buildings, factories and warehouses and hotels that closed for economic reasons, that carry history the way all places carry history, embedded in the walls, available to those who look, but not urgent, not unfinished. You can explore those places and leave them behind without residue. Some places are still carrying something, the weight of what happened inside them, the people who moved through their corridors without choosing to, who left marks on walls and objects in tins and crossed off days on calendars, and who were never publicly named or mourned or accounted for in any way proportionate to what they experienced. Those places follow you. They should follow you. I would be more worried about myself if this one had not. I want to end by asking you something I don't have a confident answer to. When a building like this is eventually demolished, and it will be, whether next year or in 20 years, because the land has value and the structure does not, does the history go with it? Does the physical space carry something that cannot be transferred to footage or archives or articles? Something that is simply lost when the walls come down? Or does visibility like this, imperfect, commercially entangled, made by a person still working through what it means to make it, does it serve a purpose? Does it keep something alive that deserves to be kept alive? I've gone back and forth on that question more times than I can count. I've landed on yes, and I've landed on I don't know, and I've landed on places in between that don't have names. If you have thoughts on that, I genuinely want to hear them. Not as a signal to the algorithm. I mean it in the specific sense that I'm a person who spent 3 weeks sitting with this and is still not finished sitting with it, and other perspectives matter to me right now in a way that feels real rather than performed. And if you have a personal connection to places like this one, if you worked in an institution of this kind, researched them, wrote about them, or if someone in your family was placed in one, I especially want to hear from you. Not to extract more content, just because the comment section on videos like this has, more than once, taught me things no archive could. The tin is still on that shelf. The ribbon is still tied. Someone put it there, and it is still there, and for now at least, that has to mean something.